Yo guys, how's it going? Welcome in here to Rover Sports, and wanted to do a couple of videos tonight just on some NFL topics. We're getting almost to training camp, so it's kind of an exciting time of the year. This year in terms of training camp and everything, and wanted to talk about a couple of teams in the NFL, but I'm going to start out with the Carolina Panthers. I look at Carolina. I think Carolina is going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL next year. I think that all this Cam Newton hype is probably overrated because Cam Newton in his career has only had one good year. His physical skills of running and being like a running quarterback, they're diminishing because Cam Newton's now like a 31-year-old quarterback. He is not an accurate quarterback, and he had that one incredible year with Mike Shula, with the Carolina Panthers. And then other than that, he's been very up and down. Some teammates like Steve Smith don't really like Cam Newton. So I don't think Cam's going to have a good year because really, when has Cam ever been a guy that you can bank on consistently in this league? He's always had all the physical tools. He's a Heisman Trophy winner. He's 6'5". He can break any tackle. He's been fairly durable over his time, but now his shoulder's all messed up. He has North Turner again. His only real weapon is Christian McCaffrey because Greg Olsen is pretty much retired. He's stated now that he wants to retire. I mean, Greg Olsen's spending more time in an announcer's booth than he's spending out on a practice field. So Greg Olsen might as well. He's going to have a throwaway year. His best years are obviously behind him. He's like a 34-year-old guy that is always injured and hurt. On the defensive side, it's a complete train wreck. I mean, Ron Rivera, other than that Super Bowl year, he's been a very mediocre head coach. I mean, they get to the playoffs and then they lose to the New Orleans Saints. Really, I think Ron Rivera, if you excluded that year, if you excluded 2015, the only good year that Carolina's had, maybe, I don't know, and maybe the past 12 years other than the Jake Delhomme era, he's been a really pedestrian to shitty football coach. Really in what's it called? Let's see here. Boy, in 2013, they lost to the 49ers in the divisional game. I don't think that that's true. Oh my God. I even forget this game where the 49ers beat the Panthers in the playoffs. Totally forget it. Wow. But apparently, so Ron Rivera did have a good year where they went 12-4. But then other than that, there's been no playoff victories. It seems here that they won one playoff game in 2014, and the one playoff game that Carolina won was they beat the Arizona Cardinals that year. Oh, yeah, that was the rain game with Cam Newton. I do remember that game now. It was raining out. They played really well. But then they went up to Seattle. They got their balls busted up there. So Ron Rivera, since 2011, if I'm getting this correct, Ron Rivera, since he's been in the league since, 2011? Ron Rivera has won. He's been a head coach now for about 8 years. He's only had 4 playoff wins, or he's only actually had 3 playoff wins in about 8 years. And 6 out of those 8 years, he's won absolutely nothing. And he didn't even win that Super Bowl. And in the past 3 years, he's won no playoff games at all. So really, if I go back to 2014. If you go back to excluding the Super Bowl year, he's only won 1 playoff game, and he's had an 8-year sample size with this franchise. And he's still on this team, and it's not like he's an offensive coordinator at all. He's had Luke Kuechly, he's had good defensive players, but he had Dave Gettleman picking players for him. And you look at this Carolina roster, and Todd Davis is gone. Devin Funchess, who's a talented wide receiver, who I believe is gonna get advantage, is taken to him in Indianapolis. He's actually going to be good, but this whole team, I mean, you even have Will Grier that they selected in the third round. You don't know about the ownership of this franchise. Chris Hogan is your answer. Torrey Smith. I mean, you start looking at these names. Curtis Samuel hasn't done anything yet in this league. And Devin Funchess is better than him. And then you look at what Jordan Scarlett's going to be your backup. All you have is McCaffrey. Now, you got Paratus, who at a decent value, $10 million. You select Brian Burns in the first round. Gerald McCoy, you're probably overpaying. Again, backside of career type of player. Defensive line on paper looks really good. Secondary is iffy. The whole team's just so average, and your coach is on the hot seat. He now feels that he needs to be the defensive coordinator again and take over from, I believe, Eric Washington. This whole thing's kind of a mess in Carolina. And Cam Newton's 31. He's not really healthy. There's no wide receivers. The offensive line is spotty in several spots. I don't love the safety and cornerback play has been bad for a long time out there. This is really heading towards a full-born reboot. The teams that I'm mentioning here in this video are going to be the reboot teams, and the Carolina Panthers are that team that is going to be rebooting. Cam Newton's not going to be that good. You have Atlanta. You still have New Orleans. Tampa Bay's not going to be an easy out for you, but really Atlanta's probably going to win this division, and then New Orleans might even sneak in as a wild card because New Orleans eventually is going to fall off. But you really think Ron Rivera is going to lead this team to a playoff berth? Do you really think he's going to win enough playoff games? He's been there 8 years. It's time for a change. He's getting tired. So the fact that this is going to be a rejuvenated team, not at all. They're desperate. They're out here signing Gerald McCoy. They're out here trying to get Brian Burns. This team is a desperate team. Todd Davis is gone from this team. Greg Olsen is older. This whole team, the nucleus is gone. They're not an up-and-comer whatsoever anymore. They peaked a couple of years ago, and then ever since then, Cam's been unhealthy. And since they won the Super Bowl, they went 6-10, 7-9 in the past 2 out of 3 years, and then they won 11-5. They played New Orleans well in that playoff game, but did you really think that they were good enough to go on that run and win championships? So Carolina's just dead average, and Cam Newton is getting older. Maybe 1 year he could put it together. But if I was banking on Ron Rivera to be the head coach that leads this team to anything special, this is not a special team. This is a team that you should absolutely sell stock in because the bottom's going to fall out from the Carolina Panthers. And Ron Rivera's getting fired, and Cam Newton will probably play another 4 years. There's going to be a new coach. It's just kind of a colossal disaster.